Hitchhiker's Guide to the GRC Technology Galaxy podcast, your improbable companion to the expanding universe of governance, risk management, and compliance technology. In a cosmos where regulations multiply faster than cyber incidents drop like falling whales, and third parties sprout surprises with Vogon-level timing and poetry, this podcast is your towel. It is your battlefish and your improbability drive rolled into one. Each episode, I, Michael Rasmussen, the field researcher and galactic GRC hitchhiker for the guide, explores the constellations of GRC technology, from digital twins and AI co-pilots to compliance nebula and audit wormholes. We chart the domains, decode the jargon, and help you survive vendor poetry that promises everything, but too often delivers nothing. Whether you are a compliance officer, risk manager, or simply trying to make sense of improbable business realities, the guide offers clarity, humor, and a reminder of the golden rule. Do not panic and do not forget your towel, as well as so long and thanks for all the risks, but we'll get there at the end. Today, the improbability drive takes me back into London, and I'm back at the CoreStream GRC office here in London, and who, if you remember right, was the first episode of this podcast. So we're doing a follow-up episode on CoreStream GRC in the technology galaxy of GRC. And before, in the previous episode, if you haven't listened to it, I encourage you to go back and listen to it. I talked with Paul. Now I'm sitting with one of the founders of CoreStream, Richard. And Richard, why don't you give our audience a background on yourself, then we get into the origins of CoreStream.
Sure, yeah.
Hitchhiker.
And thank you for having me. So I'm Richard Eddolls. I'm one of the co-founders and chief product officer here at CoreStream. I first left my day job January 2013 to begin what we now know as CoreStream. I suppose I'd like to say that it was some kind of grand thought out strategy that we've just applied over the last 13 years or so, but certainly we've taken a number of I suppose of changes of direction, both technically and in terms of market offering along the way. In terms of me as an individual, my first ever, I suppose, grown-up job was in Silicon Valley, working for Sun Microsystems. So I was out in the US for about 18 months before coming back to the UK to complete my degree. From there, I then joined Deloitte Consulting, where I was working on a number of technology-related engagements for about 5 years or so, before going the kind of typical path of contracting for me in program management before starting CoreStream.
Oh, I love that. I mean, you bring up a name that I haven't heard in years, but love Sun Microsystems. Wow. I mean, gosh, 20 years ago, a little over 20 years ago, I not only had a PC, because was working at Forrester at the time, and a Mac, because I love Mac, but I had a Sun workstation on the Unix side on my home office desk. Wow.
And definitely during the dot-com boom, they were very difficult to get a hold of.
Yes.
Some of the stories I used to hear. I actually went to Sun just after the dot-com bubble burst, but they were still telling the stories of the things they used to get up to, and in fact, actually, the way that they would sell their products, that people would literally phone them up to just ask to buy a Sun Microsystems server, and it's quite remarkable, really. But it was a great organisation.
It certainly was. But let's get into the great organization of CoreStream GRC. Tell us about the origins of CoreStream. In fact, I've known you for, it's got to be over a decade now.
Yeah,
and I think one of my original meetings learning about CoreStream as an analyst was in, I think, the Mayfair area of London, in an office there.
Yes. Yeah, so as I said before, I left my day job January 2013. I think that, at a personal level, I knew that I always wanted to start something. I just didn't necessarily know what that was. And I also wanted, I suppose, to have a level of experience before taking the plunge. And obviously the years at Deloitte helped provide me with that. In terms of the opportunity though, in my last role as a program manager, I was working at the BBC, and I was responsible for setting up a compliance function there. And as part of that, we were looking for technology to digitise the process. And I suppose that just led to a number of frustrations really just made me think of the opportunity in the GRC space, because I found that when we were going to market, it was that typical kind of shiny salesperson who would nod along to every request, not really challenge us in anything that we were thinking of doing, and not really understand the space either. They were selling effectively a widget without really understanding why they were selling it and perhaps who they were selling it to. I also think a number of the technology solutions we looked at during that process, they just felt clunky, really difficult to use, really difficult to engage with, certainly not intuitive, and just interfaces that would just immediately turn users off, which I found just incredibly frustrating. I also think there was a definite kind of lack of flexibility. Again, what we were looking for at that time was something very, very specific to the BBC and their processes. Whereas most of the things we were finding were, if you want a solution that does compliance or some certain type of workflow, here's how it works, here's how it does it, you have to bend your organization to the tech. And so really, I suppose, set about designing a platform where you didn't have to compromise. We can support your ways of working with our technology.
So how would you characterize the core DNA of CoreStream, and how has it changed or not changed over the years?
It's a really interesting question, and I was thinking actually before we started. I think that the three kind of key areas that we tend to focus on haven't changed that much over the years, and those are: one, flexibility. So as I described before, we want technology to be an enabler, not a barrier. We want to make sure that it can flex to your ways of working, your methodology. And really the reason for that is that the technology part of what we do is part of the puzzle, right? It's not the solution in its own right, and I think we're open to I suppose to even recognizing that. We don't think we're selling the solution, we're selling part of the solution. The second one, alongside flexibility, is intuitiveness. So like I was saying before, we want the interface to be as clean and uncluttered and straightforward to use as we possibly can. In the very early days of CoreStream, I actually sat my then 6-year-old daughter down and asked if she could create a risk for me, please, in CoreStream. And while she didn't understand the language, she could navigate the interface, and it was quite a fun exercise to go through. And the third one is quality, and that's obviously both quality of the tech, but also quality of the service that's wrapped around it. Because, as I was saying before, technology is only part of it. It's a lot of the advice, it's the delivery process, it's the support that you provide once you've handed it over into BAU that are also really kind of key factors here. So those three things, I think when we're talking to prospective clients, those three things were back then and still are today things that we focus on. In terms of CoreStream as a whole, I think probably the key word is care. It's the thing that we look for in all of our employees, and it's obviously a thing that's really difficult to retain as you scale a business. It's very easy for me as co-founder and others who are here from day one to care about what they do. It's very hard when you're then up to kind of 100+ people to make sure that they care to the same extent. And I think we've managed to kind of ingrain that in the culture here, and as I say, it's one of the first things that we look for when we recruit someone to CoreStream.
Now, you're focused at CoreStream a lot on the word value, and I love that. A lot of organizations, it's like almost trying to just hit a checkbox requirement, but you actually want to return value to your customers. And even in your AI strategy, a lot of your competitors are talking about AI first and things, but that's not your message. Tell us about CoreStream's vision for AI, but how it's really focused on outcomes and value.
Yeah, definitely, and I think one of the key things to us is we don't see technology itself as a feature. We look at the business benefit that's realised through having a particular feature, and then we look at the way in which we can deliver it. So some may or may not include AI. It's obviously a particularly kind of hot topic area at the moment. Our AI strategy, though, has been to remain effectively AI agnostic. It's a similar strategy that we've used for data providers in the past, where really we want to make CoreStream incredibly easy to integrate with, and we want to provide, again, to the flexibility point, we want to provide clients with the choice. So they can choose whether to use AI or not. If they do want to use AI, is it a particular partner of ours or third-party provider? Is it a particular LLM that they just want us to connect with? Really just allowing them to make the choice. And I think that's really important because obviously, I mean, one of the main challenges of the use of AI is data privacy and making sure that you're not potentially leaking data that you shouldn't be. So I think clients get the most kind of comfort from knowing that they can be the ones to actually choose, as I say, whether to use it and also what to use.
One of those AI partners that you worked with, that you had some recent press and publicity about, is SANNOS. Can you tell us about what you're doing with them?
Yeah, I mean it's a really exciting, powerful offering. So I know obviously you're aware of what SANNOS do, but essentially we're bringing the combined power of the CoreStream platform and the SANNOS capability together. So that means then that users in CoreStream can be uploading the evidence that they want to assess against any number of frameworks, including completely custom frameworks that SANNOS is trained on, and then within half an hour have a full report back of your level of compliance against that particular standard or framework. Incredibly powerful offering because we can also then provide the bits that come before and after that process. So whether it's risk profiling your organisation and your activities to understand which parts of which frameworks you want to assess compliance against. We then do the assessment of that compliance through SANNOS, and then at the other end of that, you can then perform all of the action tracking and risk management that comes at the back of that process as well. So it's a partnership that we're particularly excited about. It's also, I suppose, turbocharging our move into cyber. So one of the demo environments that we're working on at the moment allows organisations to assess their compliance against the SCF, the Secure Controls Framework, and then automatically assess their compliance against the mapped frameworks. So, for example, a client may say to us, we would like to assess ourselves against ISO, NIST, SOC 2, whatever it might be. We can then serve them the correct SCF controls within CoreStream, assess the compliance of those using the SANNOS capability, and then automatically give them a rating against those mapped frameworks, which is a particularly powerful offering that we'll be making a splash about in the coming weeks. Excellent.
Now I'd like to explore another area of value, but first I'm going to tell a story that connects it. So one large European global manufacturer calls me up last August, September timeframe. I can't remember the exact date. And they said, we're at the end of our enterprise risk RFP. Can you come in and help us make a decision? And I said, certainly. And so I come to their office, and before they even disclose who their final two are, they ask me the question, if you were us, who would be the three solutions you would look at? And I mentioned CoreStream and two others. CoreStream and one of the two others I mentioned were the two finalists, so I nailed it. I gave them my opinions on the two solutions, including CoreStream. And then I followed up with them in January when I was back in Europe. I was in their office, meeting with their head of risk, and asked her, so why did you choose CoreStream? Because they ended up choosing CoreStream. And it was a fascinating discussion, and it gets back to that value piece. I mean, they stated, and I agree, both the final two can meet all the requirements in the RFP. So when it came down to the requirements, both companies can meet it. Both companies have a great culture and people. They're good companies to work with. But the thing that made them decide on CoreStream was that you challenged them. That, the other company, the competitor, which there's great things I can say about them, they came in and say, we can meet the requirements. You came in and said, we can meet the requirements, but you've thought of doing it this way. We think your program can be improved. And you put them in touch with one of your other clients that, actually had almost a cookie cutter, approach to what they wanted for enterprise risk, that had leveraged the value of CoreStream. And so it was those two things, that client reference that was able to connect with them because they had identical requirements, but also the whole fact that you said, we can meet your requirements as they are, but we think there's a better way of doing this. And that provided a lot of value, and that made them choose CoreStream over this other competitor that could have met the requirements as well.
Exactly. I think that comes back to the point that I was making about us making sure that those talking to clients truly understand not just the technology of what we provide, but also the subject matter, because you're only able to provide that challenge if you understand the requirements, not just at the surface level, but how they're actually going to be, I suppose, operationalized. It's an interesting one as well, because I think over the years, I think if you go back possibly, let's say 5 or 6 years, a number of professional services firms thought that they almost needed to become tech firms. You couldn't really deliver advice or service without a layer of tech. I think interestingly now what we're going to see is that tech providers, if you put us in that category, are going to also need to ensure that they are advisors, because there needs to be a reason to select your organisation. So it's kind of gone full circle in a way. But yeah, absolutely. I think that's a strategy that we're very much leaning into. As I said, technology is a part of what we do, but it's the advice around, are those the right requirements? It's I suppose the deployment process and making sure that our design team are also well placed to challenge what the client's asking for, to leverage other solutions that we've implemented in other places, to make sure that we arrive at the best outcome. And I think one of the reasons as well, actually, that we're perhaps uniquely placed to do that is we work across so many different industries. So it means that you don't end up in this kind of single industry echo chamber. You actually have the opportunity to bring best practice from other industries to any new client opportunity that you might be working on.
Now, another angle of value to unpack, first off is even use cases. So we haven't really tackled that. We've been talking about CoreStream GRC, but I've encountered you doing really good things in enterprise risk management and with that operational risk. The third-party risk management, you've got some great, case studies and use cases in some of the most complex organizations on the planet. The conflicts of interest, the CoreStream is a broader GRC platform, internal controls, audit. I mean, you're doing a range of use cases, but one of the key things is your configurability. And that, I think it's important to point out in the value, because a lot of people are very concerned about customization. Some of your competitors in this space, are highly customized where things break, and they can't even get to the next version of the product because things are so broken. And customization is different from configurability. And you've got this highly configurable, what you would characterize as a Lego building blocks type approach to GRC. Can you talk about the value there and how that's enabled you to enable all these different use cases?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I've obviously heard the horror stories of now CoreStream clients where they've been using a different platform where they've effectively been blocked from upgrading because they're on a customized version. I think actually we were perhaps relatively fortunate with the timing in that the original version of CoreStream that we had was a SharePoint back end with our kind of interface layered over the top of that. When we re-architected the platform about 8 years ago, we took the opportunity to really build it in a way that meant that we should never have to re-architect it again. And what I mean by that, without getting too technical, is we separated the layers. So if we need to substitute our front end or our database out for another, we absolutely can. But the way in which we put that platform together also effectively kind of separated out the configuration layer. That means that if you were to look at one particular platform instance over here that's perhaps satisfying an ERM requirement, but then you looked at another one over here that's satisfying perhaps broad GRC or third-party risk. All of those are on the same CoreStream code base, and it's the configuration layer that sits in the middle that then makes one very, very different to the other. And really what that means is that you'll never end up in this situation where you're entirely blocked and can't upgrade because we've customized, because the only way we do customization is through that config layer. We don't branch code, we don't write specific code for specific clients, because that then leads to those horror stories. I think the other thing as well actually is that the reason that we cover such a breadth of different use cases so effectively is the integration. So this is not about kind of turning on a module over here and turning on a module over here. It's about understanding which parts of those modules clients may want to use, and also the connections between the two of them. So if we've got risk management going on over here and we've got some form of assurance or audit going on over here, connect the two. And that's one of the things that we really factored in when we revamped the platform 8 or so years ago.
Now, CoreStream GRC is its own entity that does so much in GRC, but you're actually part of something bigger and broader with Axiom GRC. Well, what is that, and where does CoreStream fit into that?
Yeah, absolutely we are. So we're now part of Axiom GRC. We have been for about the last 5 years. They've been extremely supportive of us as an organisation. I think they've let us do what we do best and kind of given us autonomy in the right areas, but also supported us in a number of ways, made us, I suppose, challenge ourselves in certain ways, made investment in areas where we were perhaps falling short. And in fact, I always come back to your reference of referring to CoreStream as a best kept secret, which was both a compliment, but also something that clearly we needed to focus on. Which is why we now have a marketing function that's doing some great work.
And so we're in 2026. If we had to look to the future, pick a nice round year, end of the decade, 2030, what does CoreStream look like then?
So it's a really interesting question. I think it's difficult almost to know what the world's going to look like when you consider how rapidly some of technology is moving on. I like to think that a lot of what we're doing now, a lot of those themes will remain. Those 3 things that I outlined at the start of the conversation, I think, are things that clients will still want then. I think it'll just be a case of, what we're delivering it and potentially how we're delivering it will move on. We've obviously, we were talking earlier about the use of AI in the configuration, and the fact that actually we're going to get to a point very soon that you'll be able to effectively talk to CoreStream to configure it. So what that then means is that we can start to move that more into the hands of clients and allow them to actually customize pretty much everything that CoreStream supports them in. I also think, there's obviously, and I know you blog about this quite regularly, but the digital twin and allowing, I suppose, organisations to run different scenarios through CoreStream and really use those interconnected GRC modules to answer those questions of, if this goes wrong over here, then how is that truly impacting me as an organisation? And delivering that in a way that's, as we were saying, truly adds value. In terms of the opportunity though, in my last role as a program manager, I was working at the BBC and I was responsible for setting up a compliance function there. And as part of that, we were looking for technology to...
Well, that's an excellent insight. If we, just closing here, is there anything else you want to leave our audience with on what they should know about CoreStream GRC?
I think that's probably hit the nail on the head. I think it's about, I'd obviously encourage anyone out there who is looking at tech providers in this space to consider CoreStream. Again, I go back to the best kept secret, which we're working very hard to address. But I think that there can be a tendency to go for providers who have perhaps invested in making sure that they're on the Magic Quadrant, or just a big recognised names. Whereas I think there's an awful lot of stronger offerings. And obviously, CoreStream is the one that are worth talking to.
Well, that's something else to bring up before we close. Is you're in London, you're headquartered in London. You do a lot in the UK, but I've encountered CoreStream in complex organizations in the United States, the Middle East, across Europe. I mean, you are a global player.
Absolutely, we are. Yes, yeah, and those are the three kind of main markets for us. We've been in the US now for about a decade. We're now there both through partner channel and direct. Same in the Middle East, and obviously, we're headquartered in the UK. But again, with grand plans to consider other markets like Australia.
Excellent. So, Richard, thank you for being on the podcast today.
Thank you very much.
Across the GRC galaxy, that vast, peculiar stretch of space where every answer spawns 6 new frameworks and potentially thousands of spreadsheets or emails, every dashboard claims enlightenment, and somewhere on a forgotten moon of internal control, a committee is still debating whether a spreadsheet counts as a system of record. The search, of course, goes on for the ultimate answer to GRC technology. Some insist the ultimate answer to the ultimate question of governance, risk management, compliance is a platform that might be on some major analyst firm, quadrant or wave, but I would argue against that. So we need to really look at, how we approach this and what's the right technology and its flexibility and value and how it actually delivers to the organization and can't be summarized in a 2-dimensional grid. Others are convinced, GRC is a framework or a taxonomy, a control library, an ontology. But the guide, being a practical document, continues to suspect that the answer is not a single thing at all, but rather a strange and improbable combination of architecture, context, discipline, judgment, an occasional, well-timed refusal to panic. And I think that Lego brick approach in that configurability and things that CoreStream brought to us today is something to really strongly consider, and the value that delivers the organization in multiple dimensions that we explored. For in the end, the GRC universe is not conquered by those who promise universal mastery. It is navigated by those who ask better questions, design smarter systems, connect what matters, and remember that resilience is often what happens just after the plan is burst into flames and the workflow owner has gone on holiday. So keep looking, keep questioning, keep mapping the unknown edges of the GRC galaxy. The ultimate answer may still be 42, but the real art has always been in understanding the question, avoiding the obvious traps, and making sure no one hands the keys to the kingdom to a cheerful sub-agent with no sense of consequence. Do not panic and keep your towel within reach. And remember, in governance, as in hyperspace, it is rarely the visible asteroid that ruins the day. It is the unseen assumption traveling quietly at speed. And so long, and thank you for all the risk.